The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. It's Bryan and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security this week.
Hello. What's up?
Hello. Not much. By the time most of the world listens to our show here, I will be on vacation. I am, everybody went to Vegas a couple weeks ago for DEF CON and Black Hat, and had a good old time. And I'm actually out in Europe right now. So if this hopefully will go out on the 15th. I will have left. Yes, I'm ensconced in my hotel room in Rome, Italy, and sightseeing again. I've been to Rome before and love Rome, and we're gonna do it up. My first transatlantic flight with my daughter, and we're doing Rome, and then we're gonna go up and see Paris, the Tower du Eiffel, if you will. Sorry, I apologize, my awful accent there. And we're going to try to avoid all the protests that are going on, which as of the 8th, when we're recording this, is going on in both Rome and France, and Paris. And then we're going to be taking the train out to Burgundy region for a nice 7-day river cruise. So if you happen to see me in either one of those cities, it really is me. Sorry. I don't expect much. I will sign autographs. If you see me, I will sign an autograph. I mean, it will never happen. It will never happen. But if you come up and go, hey, breaking down security, you're
going to wear the shirt or something so people notice you?
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be like, according to the weather, it's supposed to be like 38, 39 degrees there, C. So it's going to be like 100 damn degrees. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be so hot. Which actually, it's only going to be a few degrees cooler here in Seattle during the time that we're supposed to be in Italy and France. So, we're going to be enjoying that Mediterranean heat. So, I thought about wearing the shirt, but it's like, it would be like that guy from Guardians of the Galaxy, was his name? Chris Pratt, with a Chris Pratt t-shirt on or something, with Chris Pratt with a Chris Pratt face on it.
As long as they don't change the rules on you and say, oh, you have to take a test, and then you get a false positive, and then you got to quarantine for 10 days and your whole vacation is shot. Yeah.
Thankfully, they lifted
it's a risk.
Yeah, they definitely lifted the restrictions on the testing, as long as you've been fully vaccinated and have proof of said vaccinations. My wife actually had to get a test before she went in for some dental surgery a couple of weeks ago, and she came up negative. So take it as you will. I've been in fairly close contact with my wife for the past year and a half. So if we'd have gotten it, I would imagine that test is fairly accurate. But it's the first time we've traveled I've traveled on a plane in over 18 months. So it's a little unnerving. There's a little bit of apprehension there. So I will be trying to drink as much as I can. I have a relative
that gives COVID shots, and she said, I think it was a Chinese family came, and their grandfather had come from China to visit them, and they were actually filming him getting the shot as proof, so that when he went back, he could prove that he got the vaccination. So not only did he get the card, but he also had it on video.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Plus, if they had trouble getting it in China, then they had better access to it here. So, but I can't remember the last time I flew. So I don't remember if it was when we took our last trip on the Rhine River back in late 2018. That seems about right. But yeah, 2019. So it'd be 2019. But yeah, it's a little apprehension there, obviously, all the unknown unknowns. So yeah. but anyway, they didn't. If you see me in Paris or in the Burgundy region of France or in Rome, just say hey. I'll have a mask on, so it'll be that much harder to find me. So, um, but so you're doing all right though, Mr. Betcher. I hear things are odd in Texas, so glad to hear your family is safe.
Yeah, doing good
That's all
so
right.
far.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. And of course, Miss Berlin won't be here because she drove to Vegas. This is the last day with DEF CON and Black Hat on the 8th here. So she's in the middle of driving back, I would imagine, to Ohio with her friends that she carpooled with across the states there. So hopefully she'll be back for our next live podcast at the end of the month. So cool. All right. So want to go ahead and get right into our discussion here. One of the things that I had been thinking about, I go out and I take my walks regularly when I'm listening to other podcasts and things. And, I was thinking about the show we did a couple of weeks ago with Miss Berlin and yourself talking about, she said that they had so many vulnerabilities coming out recently that they had to actually triage the more important ones or the most important ones. And I was thinking about how companies react to that in terms of, well, if there's so many vulnerabilities, how do they know which ones to run incidents on? Or, are they always constantly in an incident response kind of mood or frame of mind? And I was just trying to think about, what does that look like now with all of these vulnerabilities? So it seems like every week we've got another crushingly bad one, whether or not it be a Windows bug or a Cisco bug or, a VMware bug or, God knows what is going to come up in the next couple of weeks. But, I was just thinking about, how people do incident response, and is it changing because of the seemingly increasing speed of these vulnerabilities? And, not to mention, the work from home paradigm, but most everybody's in the cloud, or they should be, or, I can't imagine how you're still working with a physical data center these days. So I was just thinking about how, incident response is being done, and if there's things that could be done to make it better, make it easier, or things, talking points to think about there in terms of incident response. So we had I started looking up some items, and I took the SANS course back in 2017 for incident response, and I just renewed that, which is also something else that I was thinking of in my mind, and found a couple of blog posts talking about, whether to respond or not to respond. And one of the things that you learn in the GCIH class is something called PICERL, PICERL, and it's not anything SANS specific. There's several websites out there, including a couple in our show notes about what those are. So it's preparation, identification. See how well I did on this exam. So it's a containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. So, Mr. Betcher, before we started the show, I asked you if you worked in incident response, and you said, no, I might kick off some incident responses. But you work with companies doing acquisition, or companies that are being acquired. Incident response is big for those companies, and it's probably something y'all review when you're, talking to those organizations, right?
Oh yeah, every company is different. So when we meet with a new one, they may have almost no security, and some of them are very mature. So it all depends. When you were talking earlier, I was reminded of one incident that we had a few weeks ago, where it was a red team attack, which means our internal pen testers did a number on one of our acquired companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
we went through what had happened, and we had noticed that one of the endpoints did not get its updates from our EDR vendor in time. So the vulnerability was 24 hours old, and it didn't get those updates the day before when it should have, right? And so that way it was exploited with this new vulnerability. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have to go back and see, okay, what happened? What do the logs say? Why did this occur? Is it a bug? It was the system offline for any reason? So that led to bigger and bigger things. And come to find out, we have to go back to the vendor because we found other, um, just doing research, we found other systems that didn't get their updates in time. So we need to know what's going on. And so it's those lessons learned that and the preparation, right? The preparation is doing uh, these um, scenarios, right, internally
Mm-hmm.
to sharpen the saw, so to speak, and then go
Right.
back and say, okay, what happened here? How can we fix it? Do we need to spark a problem ticket, and drive that to some sort of a resolution, right? So I
Right.
think that's a good example of how this whole process can work. And it's not a real incident; it was a test, but it led us to find some things that were, if it were a real incident, we may have been able to prevent that had we gotten those updates in that system in time,
Right.
right? So now we'll be more prepared for something that may occur for reals in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, uh, but you still had to go through the whole process, right? So you talked about things that they found and you identified things, and so there's a playbook. For instance, the first thing they mentioned in this blog post is defining what an incident is. You had a playbook where certain criteria has to be met, or certain things have to be checked to say, okay, this is an event, or this is an incident. Now we're going to light off the process for incident response, or, we just needs to have a patch. So I would imagine something is, and I guess it would depend on the severity of it. So EDR is probably a very important thing for your organization. If it was I don't know. You may there may be different classifications depending on the listeners' organizations. Certain systems may be more important than others. If it's a web server that's
Yep.
down, that is not for something else, it may be a low issue or low impact. I guess it would imagine it would depend on the impact of what the finding was. But you have a playbook there where it's like, oh, our EDR is not detecting these things. You may have thrown an incident for that. Do you have, are there specific playbooks, or is it just kind of a, well, is it a feeling where you're saying, hey, this is probably important, or is it like, yes, EDR is always important, we should always fix that? For us, I know we have specific guidelines for what an incident is versus something else, but do you have guidelines for those things?
I don't think my team has guidelines for those things, but I believe the SOC does. So
Mm,
they'll typically decide what they consider an incident or not, and uh, they'll create a call and invite the necessary parties on the call, right,
right.
as an incident. Um,
Yeah.
Call and bring people on, sort of a war room type thing.
Yeah.
So they pretty much decide when they get the data. Typically, they'll create one if it's, even if they think it might be minor, they'll still create one and let the experts that they bring on decide if this needs to be looked at further. So yeah,
Right.
their playbook is, hey, is this something that probably should be looked at by other people, and does it have the potential to span some sort of an outage if it hasn't already, or do we look at this as some sort of a potential data loss event, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing, or a
Yeah.
systems down type event.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's part of the preparation bit. I think the preparation kind of helps you do the remaining 5 steps. So, there's processes, procedures, playbooks, um, you know, preparation may also be tabletop exercises to know how to respond to various things, setting up criteria for what, denotes an incident. The other thing that I think a lot of organizations may not do is setting criteria for when an incident has ended, or what it's easy enough to say, okay, yes, the incident is, this is an incident because X, Y, and Z has been done. But at what point do you say, well, okay, we've been working on this for like 2 months and we still have classified it as a quote unquote incident? There needs to be some kind of, now this is no longer an incident. This is a problem management or some kind of other issue where we need to bring in a dedicated PM. We need to set up a project. We need to, move this out of the incident response area because there's a story I have when I first started working at my new joint. I got pulled into a war room and I asked them, I was like, well, oh crap, we're in an incident. How long has this been going on? Oh, about 3 months. And I was like, wait, what? This is no longer an incident. This needs to be given to a PM, and assets need to be assigned and timelines need to be set up. And we don't need to be paging people and saying, hey, get your ass in this room and tell me what you're going to do about this thing. And
typically an incident ends and a problem begins, right? At that point, it becomes a problem ticket. And, you get a problem manager on the case, right? He brings in the necessary people to either remediate the problem or have a procedure to instigate whenever that quote incident or problem occurs in the future, right? You may have a bug that comes up every week, right? And there's no way you can fix that bug because either you don't have the budget, the resources, or the expertise, or it's a vendor problem. Then you can kick off a procedure to address that bug whenever it comes up. So that's part of the problem management process. It's either a fix or a procedure to mitigate that problem.
Right. And the other thing is there's other things going on there too. It's like status and communication is different in an incident than in a problem. A status, you may have to give, hourly updates or daily updates or weekly updates to, various people in your organization, or you may have to have, specific meetings for specific groups of folks. And, having those constant meetings is, one, I would argue, not helpful unless, there's a dedicated reason to be pulling in, 8 people into a meeting every 3 or 4 days to go, okay, we've done 20% more of this thing. And, we've done 21% more of these things, now we're at 22% complete, and it's like at some point you need to have exit criteria. If you don't have those in your playbook to go, and then follow on. It's like, okay, what do you do when you've satisfied or gotten over the initial hump? So ransomware issue, you may have, identified there's a ransomware issue. You may have cleaned up the business impacting bugs, but then, it's going to be like, well, the lessons learned is, well, what do we need to do? And it's like, okay, the problem was that we didn't have this technology, or the problem is that we weren't looking at X, Y, and Z, or we weren't looking at the logs. Mr. Betcher, you mentioned logs, and logs are your life, but then the problem manager would be like, well, okay, we need to put a process into place and, to address this for the future, because we know that these logs aren't looked at, or they're not ingested properly, or what have you. So, there's a whole, the incident management playbook will then beget, the problem management playbook. And then you might have 8 or 9 different things.
When that transition occurs, okay, to begin an incident, you have to have something upsetting your CIA triad, right? Your confidentiality, availability, or integrity. Something's wrong with that. That sparks an incident. When that thing has now been fixed, that becomes a problem ticket at that point, right? So when let's say your integrity, there was a breach of integrity at some point, and then that got fixed in the course of the incident management process. Then once that integrity is fixed and back to normal, then your problem management sparks. Okay, what happened to create this and how do we mitigate that problem so it doesn't happen or occur in the future.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
And
think about it as your triad.
right. Right. And you know, these things, some of these things in this incident response may take months, like eradication of, eradication of, viruses or ransomware or something like that, depending on how badly you were hit. It may take a long time depending on your architecture to fix. You know, if it's like, well, we have a physical data center in Duluth, Minnesota, and I'm going to have to go up and be in the cage for 8 hours a day for 2 months to eradicate these things or rebuild these systems. Versus, hey, I'm in AWS, I'm just going to stand up another AZ over here and set up a new VPC, and we're just going to rebuild our entire environment from scratch, and we'll just blow away the old one and make sure the new one's patched. And so, I mean, there may be different levels to some of these where eradication or what have you, it may take a long time. Or recovery in this case, once you're starting to eradicate. I would argue that things like eradication and recovery are along the same lines, because once you've started eradicating, you're trying to recover and get back to whatever your status quo is there, or whatever your normal bit is. They do make the delineation in this blog post from Team Ascend that recovery is the testing of the fixes in the eradication phase. You may be working with your recovery team. You may have your red team may be the ones that are attempting to work on this issue to help you know if those fixes are good or in place. Of course, recovery can only work if you actually have good threat intelligence. So, that may be something you realize during your incident, that you don't have good threat intelligence. So finding, intel feeds would be most likely there. So let me see here what we got. So, yeah. How should you, one of the, go ahead.
Yeah, we talked about preparation and that gives you a sense of being able to decide if an incident happens, and also identifying an incident when it does occur. Being able to know that you have an incident is really key. We always talked about, hey, if you haven't been breached, maybe you don't even know you have been, right? And that's a big deal. You have to be prepared to identify that breach, right? When it
Right.
and if it should occur. A lot of companies out there, and I'm pretty confident in saying this, are compromised right now and they don't know it, right? How
Yep.
long would it take for you to identify that compromise? Does the attacker, and we've had some red team incidents with some of these companies, and the red team gets tired of being in the environment for so long. They need to end it, right, and move on to something else. So they just start causing things to happen, like pop-ups, things that are non-intrusive, non-destructive, but something to tell them, hey, there's a problem. Do they
Right.
at what point do they notice that they are compromised, and bring this up to, like I said, the SOC, and so that they spark an incident, right? And then they bring the more experienced people involved in it, and typically within a few hours they'll decide, okay, I know exactly what happened. This is probably our internal team because of this MO, or why would a real attacker have a pop-up that says, give me your Bitcoin or something like that,
Right.
right? And they never bring down any systems. So it's good to test in that fashion to see how long it would take for the uh, the internal people to identify uh,
Right.
a compromise.
Right. Yeah. So, you mentioned talking with other core companies or what have you. When I was um, working with engagements where you needed to see documentation, and you could almost smell the BS in the air when you'd say like, well, I need to see your incident response documentation, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't have that on me. Yeah, I'm gonna we'll get back to you by the end of the day. And I'm like, Okay, I started scribbling down, no incident response policy because they don't have
Of
one.
course, we got a policy. Okay, please send it. Crickets.
Crickets, yeah.
Usually,
Oh,
when you
sorry.
ask for the documentation, it doesn't come. It never does.
Right, right.
So always ask. Don't trust but verify.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's as much as I like to bag on things like PCI and HIPAA, I think those things require or suggest that you have that documentation, or the they get you the doc, and the timestamp for when it was made was today or something like that, or it hasn't been updated in
Yeah.
5 years. And a lot of the I see incident response as a continuing process, an improvement process, a continuation change management process, if you will, because as you follow this PICERL or PICERL, your lessons learned is automatically going to start moving back towards your preparation area, because as you learn these things, like you had mentioned with the endpoint security response, there's things missing in your playbook there that you might have lost some visibility in your endpoint solution. So part of the preparation is to make sure that doesn't happen again in the future, so you don't have to have this incident. Every incident is supposed to be a learning experience, and you're supposed to work through those and have less incidents as you go along. I've worked with you, I don't know, for what, about 3.5 years, and then we've been doing the podcast for about 6 more. I don't want to say I've been lucky to not have to deal with an incident, but I've never actually been on something that I would have classified as an incident, or if we did have an incident, it wasn't considered an incident. And we just kind of worked to ameliorate the issue before it became bigger than it was. But I I'm great. Knock on the fake wood here, because I've never had to deal with a ransomware attack or anything like that. So thankfully, that has not been an issue. I think a lot of folks who work in consultants firms or whatever kind of get that false sense of security when they have not had to deal with an incident before. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, the second piece of PICERL is identification. That's very important, especially when you define scope, right? Because you don't want to go in and let's say 2 machines have been ransomwared, and you say, okay, restore from backup, let's go. You
Yeah.
kind of don't want to do that. You want to step back and say, okay, how did this happen? Right now, if it was just 2 users who happened to fall for a campaign where it was isolated to them, you need to figure out if that was indeed the case, because it
Right.
could be something larger, could be systemic in the environment, but these 2 systems were the only ones affected.
Right.
So it's very important that you don't let the attackers know that they're there before you figure out how they got in, what systems are potentially compromised. And you can do this without them detecting that. There are ways through logging, or your EDR or antivirus solution, or just poking around and seeing, okay, what are the artifacts on the machine that we know is compromised. Let's see if we can find those artifacts everywhere in the environment, right?
Right.
And see if anyone else is well, and define scope that. And then once you have found all the systems that have been compromised that you know of, and you believe you have found out how they got in initially, maybe it was a system that wasn't patched or something like that, or social engineering or what have you, then you can begin the cleanup efforts, and only then. Otherwise, you may still have that issue and you think you've eradicated it, but you really haven't. And that puts you in an even worse situation.
Right. That's an interesting thought there, the identification thing, because so I worked in IT a lot, and IT was one of those things where it was very reactionary. It's like you see a problem, you fix a problem. Incident response, the way you make it sound is, this is not a see a problem, fix a problem thing. This is a see a problem, let's observe, the
Yeah.
mountain gorillas, and like a nature biologist kind of person who's, um, let's observe the machine itself to see if there's anything else going on. Now, obviously, from an IT or a person who somewhat knows the systems, the impetus would be to, I need to fix this because every second that I quote unquote waste is going to cause me more and more work, or it's just going to be more and more, explanation. Hey, why, you saw them doing X. Why didn't you, fix it, from your boss's boss. And yeah, the important thing there is to communicate your timelines and everything by saying, look, we had to, observe this because if we'd have fixed it and we only, plugged one hole in the dam instead of all of the holes in the dam, there might have been other attack vectors that they had. So the one thing you need to stress, and hopefully your incident response manager or the incident commander can work with you to explain that in your timeline. Hey, we had to observe this system. We noticed the email came in, the person clicked on it. According to the logs, here's the timeline, and then we noticed 15 minutes later they jumped to this file share. Now, if you'd have fixed it, if you'd have not looked at it and went ahead and said, oh, we're just going to block that immediately and fix it, you may have missed the lateral movement over to the file server. And yes, oh, we fixed everything. Right. We've eradicated the bad guy, but they're still on your file server and you just, you're not looking. So definite
and then
monitoring.
They know that and that's even worse. So they're going to be much more stealthy in their attacks from that point on. So they'll be much more careful because they know that something is up, right? Because you fix that one system, but they're still in your environment, so they're going to be low and slow from that point on. It kind of reminds me of a couple of things I have. One is, and I hope I can remember the second one once I'm done with the first one, but it's almost like you see a crime being committed. You're law enforcement. You may not want to arrest the perpetrator right away. There may be bigger fish to fry. So you wait and observe, like, okay, is he taking orders from someone else? What are his victims, and there may be an opportunity to observe that person and then find out where they're actually getting their orders from, or like somebody who's attacking ATMs and getting money out of them.
Right.
They may be just the bagmen for the real attackers who are actually compromising the ATMs, from the internet or something, right? Or giving them specific instructions on how to do it and which ATMs to attack. So you don't want to go arrest all the bagmen, because there's always another bagman. You need to go arrest the source of the problem, right? Yep. Same thing with this, right? Just low and slow identification, very important.
Yep. And I think that's why you're so you like to stress the being able to be visible in your environment. Just having simple things like logs, or being able to look for those indicators of compromise or persistence mechanisms. I think that there's probably, as I have said, I am not an incident response person, but I would imagine that there is a point at which you would stop observing and want to fix that issue. Like, if they're getting close to a database or something, or, I think that's probably a very nuanced skill set, knowing when to say when. In this case, it's like, okay, we've let them get in, we've let them laterally move, we've left them, oh shit, now they're in the database. Okay, yeah, we're done. We're gonna pull this plug. We're gonna do all that, and we'll burn it down later. But I think it's very nuanced, and I think that's something that even I myself am not privy to, because like I said, I would definitely be the stereotypical, oh shit, I got to fix this because I don't want to be here forever and ever, having to deal with these things. I would want to try to see the problem, fix the problem. So for me,
Yeah.
there definitely is the hey, I would like to fix this now because I don't want to be on the front page of USA Today or something like that because my company got breached. So
Right.
yeah,
So,
the incident
that
response
leads
stuff
me to
does take a cool head.
my second thing, which, for those of you on the edge of your seats, here it is. Being jumpy, right, could lead to some things you don't want to happen. And I'll give you an example. HIPAA requires that if a system is compromised, that if it does have healthcare data on it, personal health information on that system that was, let's say, ransomware, then the rule is that was a breach by default. You then have to prove that no data was lost. So if you go ahead and just jump in and reimage the system, then you've lost the proof that you might have needed in order to go to the governing body, and I forgot what the governing body of HIPAA is, and say, here's the proof that it wasn't compromised. I have firewall logs that I can see how much data was extracted from there, and it's not enough to say that the data left the system. Or I have my endpoint data, which in Windows you have the SHRM database, and it'll actually tell you what process connected to the outside world and how much data left. So if you get rid of all that, then you've lost the ability to prove that you didn't have a breach. And they'll use the B word, breach, right? So if this system had ransomware at all, then it was breached, as long as there was any private health information on that system. And then you have to publicly announce that you had been, and lawyers get involved, and it's a big mess. So if you just hold on and don't lose that data, it's very important. It may save you.
That was our show for this week. You can find show notes for this and all of our shows at www.breakingsecurity.com. You can also find an RSS link on the site to add to your favorite podcatcher. You can find all of us on Twitter. Miss Berlin can be found at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. And you can follow me on Twitter at Bryan Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We have a Slack. Come join us on our Slack. A lot of great things going on there, a lot of channels of various InfoSec-related subjects. You can get an invite on Twitter by emailing our official Twitter handle for the show at Brakesec, BRAKESEC, or you can email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for their monetary assistance by offsetting costs involved in putting out a weekly show. Zoom fees, Libsyn hosting, domain purchase, renewal, equipment upgrades, time and effort building the community we have. We appreciate all of your help and support. If you'd like a t-shirt, stickers, coffee mug, or just to show your support for the show, you can check out our TPub site, www.tpublic.com/user/BDS podcast. We thrive on your feedback. A quick 5-star comment on iTunes or Google Play Store or your favorite streaming service, Spotify, Pandora, what have you, go a long way to gaining us additional visibility. It takes no time at all, and we appreciate your help in spreading the word. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Be safe, be well, be kind to one another. Take care of yourself because you're the only you have, and we'll talk to you again soon.